The Yamaha DX7 synthesizer changed the sound of music, but is it overrated? The Yamaha DX7 and its cousins like the DX7 II are legendary and among the most influential electronic instruments ever made. Released in 1983, it gave musicians innovative FM synthesis capable of producing bright, metallic, and bell-like sounds that were so different from the analog synths of the prior decades. If you've listened to 80s music, you've heard the DX7, and there was no getting away from its iconic electric piano sound. This synthesizer sold over 200,000 units in just a few years, making its mark on power ballads and pop songs from the era. Today, numerous vintage synthesizers are untouchable. If you want a real Yamaha CS80, well, you might get one if you have more than $70,000 to invest. Fancy an Oberheim 4-voice? That might run you over 25 grand. I once owned a Yamaha CS60, which today goes for thousands of dollars, if you can even find one. But when the DX7 hit the streets, I could barely give that synth away. My personal Yamaha CS60 finally sold for about $200, and it remains the one instrument I regret selling deeply. While vintage analog synths command massive prices today, you can still get a real DX7 or DX7 II for less than $1,000. But is it worth the money? Today, I'm going to give you my take on a number of reasons why the Yamaha DX7 is overrated and why you may want to save your money for something else. Let's talk about pain points. Difficult programming interface. The DX7 has a notoriously unfriendly programming interface, relying on a small LCD screen and a membrane button layout. Unlike analog synths where you can simply turn knobs to shape sounds, the DX7 buries parameters deep inside its menus. For many musicians, this steep learning curve makes editing patches painful, which is why so many users stuck with the factory presets. While FM synthesis was revolutionary, many listeners found its sound brittle, metallic, and cold compared to the warmth of analog subtractive synths. For musicians who were used to the lush textures of Moogs, Oberheims, or Prophet 5s, the DX7 could sound sterile and fatiguing in the mix. I think this is particularly true of the popular presets, but if you're willing to invest time to explore sounds created by the keyboard community over the years, you will find some gems in the patch universe, but be ready to invest time to search them out. I come from the world of vintage analog synths that offer lots of knobs and sliders for manipulating sounds while you play. Unlike such analog synths, the DX7 offers hardly any real-time controls to compare. On my DX7 II, as an example, I have 2 sliders and a mod wheel, so something is better than nothing, but I'm always wanting more options to tweak sounds when playing live. I've particularly missed the option of controlling the sound envelope while playing the DX7. Importing sounds can be tiresome. The good news is that there's thousands of Sysex sound banks available online for the DX7. The bad news is it can be tiresome to get those sounds from your computer into your instrument. Most of the library software programs that were created to work with the DX7 became outdated and extinct decades ago. Without these tools, diving into FM synthesis, particularly on this instrument, can be a headache. You'll find some editors online today, but you may have to do some digging and might find yourself spending more time on finding sounds versus playing sounds. You can find lots of sounds available with the newer Hypersynth cards that work with the DX7. I've got one of those for my instrument, and it actually has been a game changer for accessing more sounds than the 64 otherwise loaded into the instrument at one time. Mod wheel effects don't carry over with imported sounds. It's been my experience that when I import Sysex sounds, I never seem to get any mod wheel data imported with those sounds. Yep, it's possible to program them myself, but when looking at the thousands of Sysex sounds available online, that can be a cumbersome process if I need to manipulate what the mod wheel is going to control sound by sound. While iconic, the DX7 sound became so tied to the 1980s that it dated quickly. By the 1990s, musicians were avoiding it precisely because it screamed 80s pop, limiting its long-term versatility in mainstream productions. That said, I'm always finding useful pads out of my DX7 today that still sound fresh. I guess you just have to find the right sound. The DX7 became infamous for its presets like the E Piano 1 patch, which was used on countless 1980s hits. Because so many artists relied on the same sounds, the instrument became associated with sonic cliches, leading to listener fatigue and criticism that it lacked variety. This keyboard generally sounds dry, very dry. There is no onboard effects like reverb, chorus, or delay in the original DX7 models. This left its raw digital tone sounding thin or dry unless you paired it with outboard gear. For gigging musicians without racks of processors, this was a big downside. Fast forward to today, you have lots of alternatives to FM synthesis, especially if you're working in a DAW with soft synths. Think of the Arturia DX7, which I do use all the time. Think of FM8 through Native Instruments. Those are great options. On the one hand, they make it simple, they make it accessible to get to FM sounds. I think on the downside of some of the alternatives, I just don't find the variety that I otherwise have in the thousands of Sysex native patches that I have available with my DX7 when I'm playing it. It's probably possible to download and import some of those Sysex sounds into these software programs, but yet again, that's another step. So yes, there's alternatives, and then you have to make the choice. Do you go with the easy modern approach, or do you want to go with the authentic DX7 hardware approach? Triggering the DX7 via another full velocity keyboard is going to give you a much more expressive output from the DX7. At least that's my experience with the DX7 too. I think that the actual velocity on the DX7 only goes to 100, not 128. And I stumbled upon this one time when I connected the MIDI out from the DX7 into an 88 key controller that I use all the time, and I was stunned with how much more dynamics I was getting out of the DX7. So if you're playing it natively on the keyboard it came with, at least with the DX7 too, you're going to get limited expression given what happens with the way it handles velocity. Although it was one of the first instruments to feature MIDI, the DX7's implementation for MIDI was partial and sometimes clunky. Sending or receiving system-exclusive data was cumbersome, and many users struggled with transferring patches or syncing the instrument reliably with other gear. That's something I've run into. The DX7 was really a performance synthesizer and didn't include built-in sequencing or arpeggiation features. If those features are important to you, then you're going to be disappointed with the authentic DX7. And players who wanted a standalone creative workstation, especially as competitors began integrating those features, found that to be a downside with the DX7. My DX7 II model gives me 2 banks of 32 sounds. However, there's no intuitive way to organize those sounds. That can make finding desired sounds tedious. And when you're moving between imported banks, forget about easily finding the perfect sound and get ready to audition patches one by one by one. The DX7 could store only 32 patches internally, or 64 if you have the DX7 II, and that feels extremely restrictive by today's standards. Musicians needed RAM cartridges to expand the library, and those could be expensive or unreliable, adding another hurdle. If you are using the DX7 today, and if you're looking for a way to access more sounds, again, I do recommend the Hypersynth card. Again, a game changer. All right, there's my take on the downsides of the Yamaha DX7. If I missed any pain points that you have, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Still, is the DX7 really that bad? Well, I own one and I do use it, so my answer is not really. It does shine in particular ways, and I'm going to talk about those points in a future video. For now, if the pain points haven't deterred you from interest in this classic instrument and you don't own one yet, I would grab one while prices continue to be modest. Again, I saw my analog Yamaha CS60 synthesizer move from can't give it away, ultimately just getting $200 for it, to a rare find today commanding thousands of dollars in the used market. Thanks for tuning into my YouTube channel. I'd appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button to stay connected to future videos. And with that, happy music making, and I'll see you on the next video.